Hello, I'm going to be discussing the Spanish selectivity exam, which is what all students in Spain must take if they would like to go to university. Another name it goes by is EVU, which in English would be the Bachillerato Evaluation for University Entrance Exam. Bachillerato in Spain is 11th and 12th grade in the United States. During these 2 years, that's the material basically that they're learning in those classes is what they will be tested on during the selectivity now. But before we talk about that, we're going to talk a little bit about the history of the selectivity exam. They started it in 1974 when the Minister of Education at the time, Cruz Martinez Esterales, answered the demand for regulation of university exams with the Law Esterales, which did just that. So more people in the country were going to university, and he was able to answer the demand for there to be regulation in all of Spain to keep everyone more or less on the same page. So that exam was broken up into 4 parts. The students were required to answer questions about math and science, as well as doing a text analysis and an essay based on a lecture that they just heard. More or less the form has stayed the same, although it's evolved and added a few things over time. The most current one, like I said before, is called the EVAL, and this one was updated with the Organic Law of the Improvement of the Quality of Education. That law was passed in 2013, but the changes to the selectivity were not in place until 2017. So how is it broken down? Spanish history, Spanish language and literature, a foreign language, a regional language if there is one, and a bachillerato correlated subject based on which bachillerato path you've taken are the requirements that you must take. All right, and out of foreign languages, you're able to choose between English, French, German, Portuguese, and Italian. And the bachillerato correlated subject, what does that mean? What that means is in Spain, they break you up in bachillerato, like I said, 11th and 12th grade, into more specific paths. So they have sciences, humanities, social sciences, and arts. So in this category, if you're in sciences or social sciences, you're required to take maths. If you're in humanities, you have to take Latin. And if you're doing art, then you need to take the fundamentals of art. And that's how the exam is broken down. And then additionally, you have 2 optional subjects. So for example, if you wanted to be an engineer, you would probably take technical drawing and physics because the university will also be able to see those scores, and it helps them determine if they want you or not, because this exam combined with one other factor is what determines which university you get into. And these 2 optional subjects can increase your score with the selectivity exam. So that's why a lot of people can take 2. You can also take up to 4. And you're also allowed to challenge your mark. If you don't like it, you have 4 days to be like, I don't like it. And then they can add up your score again. So as I was mentioning, the way that it's broken down to decide how you get into university is based on this. So it's a 14-point scale, and of that, 6 of those points is your GPA in bachillerato. So in 11th and 12th grade, how well did you do? All right, the other 4 are those required tests that I mentioned. And then the last 4 points you get from doing those optional subject tests. And that's how it determines which university you can get into. The most competitive schools require, for example, maths and physics at a university, at one of the top universities in Madrid. You need to get a 13.667. For engineering, you need a 13.2. So all of this is very competitive, and those subject tests really do matter in bumping up and making your score higher, which is what a lot of students want. So that is the breakdown. And then when it comes to preparing for the exam and how that affects the teaching environment and students, what I really noticed is I worked in public schools and I worked in private schools. There's a lot more stress in the teaching environments in the private schools because in a way they're more invested in their students because their jobs depend on it. If their students don't do well on the selectivity exam, then that could put their job in jeopardy because they're contract employees. Whereas in the public schools, it's government employees, so it's very difficult to get rid of someone in that situation. And additionally, how this exam really affects the classroom is those subjects where you're going to be tested in 11th and 12th grade. A lot of times your exams during that course are going to mimic the way the selectivity exam would be. So instead of, asking one thing, they might ask another if it's more related to the exam that you'll possibly be taking. So it's quite important to the teachers, and it impacts the way that they instruct you. And like everything else, there is a bit of controversy with the exam because some people think that it's unfair. As this exam accounts for 8 of the 14 points, basically, it's quite a big deal. And the thing about the exam is, the good thing is that the exam is regulated in the sense that everyone has to do those subjects that I mentioned, but the different communities within Spain get to choose the questions that are on the exam. So a big issue is that a lot of particular regions feel like they're at a disadvantage because their communities, they feel like, choose the type of questions that they should, whereas other communities choose questions that are too easy. So the difficulty level of the questions isn't always the same depending on the region. And a lot of times the best schools are in Madrid and Catalonia. And as you can see, the students in Madrid and the students in Catalonia have lower scores. But it's because a lot of times in those regions, the selectivity, you could argue, would be more difficult. So there's definitely drama involved in that, in the sense that there's a lot of controversy surrounding it if you talk to students that are trying to get into university. But generally they still end up in a good place in the end. But it's definitely a point of contention. So that's a little bit about the selectivity exam. I hope you know more, and I hope you have a fantastic afternoon.